Yeah, no, so let's just start. Let's shout out Jason, who
The
did,
little bitch.
who dipped on. That's it. Yeah. So he's in Tongtan right now. For those of you who do not know how Korean geography works, that's an entire city away. So
He asked for us to meet at 2 p.m. because he had lunch.
yeah,
And
but
we were like, yeah, sure, let's meet at 2.
and then he completely forgot. And now he's like, if we were in New York, he'd be headed to Newark right now, basically.
And he told us that he couldn't make it at 2:30.
Yeah. What the hell?
That's a bitch move.
Jason, no, we're calling you out. You better watch this. No, but in all seriousness, a lot did happen this week.
Yes.
First of all, there was the whole tariff situation, which we will not get into because we actually love the United States so much.
America.
Yeah, no, we love America, and we would love to visit again someday. Heck, even buy Trump's $5 million gold
Trump,
card.
I'm willing to negotiate with you. I'll come to the White House. Please accept us.
You have no power.
I'm kidding. Obviously, I don't have any power.
Right, but also Canada's in an election cycle right now.
Yes.
We could talk about that, but
Yeah.
first off, Korea finally got rid of its president.
Yeah.
And
Let's talk about.
I don't care what anyone says. Getting rid of the president was a necessity for to get rid of uncertainty in the economy.
Yeah, I mean, that and also for the sake of democracy.
Yeah.
So in all aspects, it was like a great thing that.
Did you watch it?
No. Oh no, actually, yeah.
Yeah, you were watching it live.
yeah,
So I was watching it live, and I was like focusing on the specific wording being used, and essentially it boiled down to this. The main argument from the defense side was that, oh my God, those pesky little bitches on the Democrats, they're impeaching my hunchman left, right, and center. It's like 30 cases of impeachment, which is absolutely insane. Is that not grounds for unconstitutionality because they're abusing the constitutional law? And the courts essentially said, no, that's within their constitutional power. Sure, we should probably implement a limit, but the way it's worded right now, it's completely legal. And you shouldn't have, that doesn't allow you to just declare martial law to negate it.
And I was impressed by how specific they were because they were saying something like, by the time that martial law was like declared, all those like impeachment attempts weren't in place. So it actually, like that can't be a good reason for
Right.
martial law.
And also,
very true.
Like the claim that the president was using martial law as a warning sign
Yeah.
against his opposition doesn't also make sense because you were trying to board down the goddamn National Assembly so that they can't
Right.
vote to repeal it.
It was a stupid
Yeah.
argument. I was saying like, obviously Kim Soo-hyun, not
Yeah. Okay, so I share a name with a famous actor
Yes.
who has a huge scandal because Kim Soo-hyun, the actress who died a couple weeks back, apparently was dating this guy while she was underage, and like he came out, had a press conference, and explicitly, essentially said, "I did not have sex with her when she was a minor."
Yes. So I actually didn't know who he was before pretty recently because I don't know anything about Korean.
Dude, I didn't talk with Koreans for like during my entire NYU career.
Right. So, oh really?
Yeah. Every time I would go and I would introduce myself. Hey, yeah, no, I'm Kim Soo-hyun. It's like, why?
So I only recently heard of him, and I always used to think, wow, that's like Michael's name. But anyway, there's this other Kim Soo-hyun who's probably a pedo. I don't know where you stand on this, but he's probably a pedo. Like,
No, he's Korea's Drake.
He's what? Drake?
I can say this, I'm a Torontonian.
But anyway, I was saying his lawyers are better than the president's
Oh,
lawyers.
dude,
Like,
100%.
I was like, wow. Like, he's fucked up, and he's like, he's done some horrible things.
I think
But
like,
we gotta pay his lawyers pretty good money
Yeah.
for like coming up with those arguments.
Also, in terms of profanity, I think we're well past that.
Yeah.
But no, you're right. The legal case used to protect the president from impeachment was so shoddy.
Yes.
It was so shaky. We were like just not talking about it because we didn't want to get shot by the YouTubers.
Right.
The fact that we're more scared of the YouTubers than legal ramifications, that's kind of like, yeah, that's telling you how incompetent they were.
But Kim Soo-hyun's lawyers, they make some very good arguments.
Yeah.
And I don't think they're protecting him per se, but well, they are. But
Do you know why they're protecting him though?
I mean, they're getting paid to.
No, that plus.
Uh-huh.
Do you know why Kim Soo-hyun's paying them that much money?
Because he'll go to jail.
No, even worse.
What?
So this is funny. I hate saying that it's even worse than going to jail because going to jail should be the ultimate red flag. But he has a new Netflix show coming out.
Oh, and it could get canceled.
Yeah, and if it gets canceled, the clause stipulates in that he has to pay $100 million worth of damages.
100 million?
Yeah.
Wow. That's a lot of
So
money.
that's why he's going all hands on deck to prove that he's not a pedo.
So if, in a pure economic sense, he should pay his lawyers up to $100 million.
Oh yeah, absolutely. yeah.
So up until that point, that's like the right rational thing to do.
Yeah, that's why they're getting very well compensated.
So why do you think their lawyers are better than the president's lawyers? Like that's my biggest question. Couldn't he afford a better lawyer?
I would say if the president really wanted to stay out of prison, should have hired Jason's dad.
Yeah. Wait, who did he hire though?
His friends. Never hire based on who you're friends with. I don't know.
It's like a sitcom. Like that's
right, but it's a very common move.
Screenplay.
Yeah, no, but it's a very common move in East Asia.
To hire your friends?
Yeah.
Wow.
No, but here, think
It's
about
like
it.
an episode of like some C grade sitcom.
Right. But like, think about it this way: when you look at a president's cabinet from any country, usually it's friends. It's because you're more comfortable working with them, right? And you trust that these people will not stab you in the back.
Right.
But and this thing used to be a very ingrained part of Korean culture, not just Korean culture. It's even worse in China. It's a bit less bad in Japan, but I think it's as societies progress towards democracies and capitalism and open societies and open competition, we start realizing, dude, relying on your friends is a terrible tactic economically.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Fucking insane.
Also, just putting it out there, we don't know if Kim Soo-hyun's a pedo. I don't want to get sued. But
oh, dude, you especially because you're a Korean citizen, and this law exists in Korea where you can get sued for defamation based on facts.
You can get sued for
defamation based on facts.
How is that logical?
It's called 사실 적시 명예훼손.
Wow.
Yeah, and it's based on the fact that even if it's true, your image, your face, your brand
gets a hit
in this society.
So we can't talk about any facts if it hurts someone's brand?
Yeah, which is kind of messed up.
That's messed up.
Yeah, whereas in America, the standard for libel and damages accordingly is based on falsehood.
Right.
Which is why I'm allowed to say this shit. You're not.
Wow.
Yeah.
I didn't.
Which is why we do not discuss certain topics on this podcast because Jason is Korean. And
I gotta call Jason's dad.
Yeah.
I gotta pull him up.
Yeah. But anyway, so that's Korea. We're in a new presidential cycle. Did you know that from both camps, everybody who's gonna run for presidency just announced their candidacy?
Okay.
There's, I think, 6 people from the Democrat side.
Okay.
And
let's talk about that. Okay.
And there's 15 candidates running on the Republican side.
Wow.
It's fucking insane.
Wow, I did not follow up on this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Who's the front runner for the Republican?
So it's crazy. So there's he's the former labor minister for Yoon Suk-yeol, Kim Moon-soo.
Right.
Yeah, he's the front runner.
He's the governor of Gyeonggi-do, or
he used to be. Yeah.
Right.
And what's even worse, so his journey is quite interesting. I didn't know this. My wife told me he actually used to be a super communist because he used to be a labor activist.
Right. He was handing out like the Red Book in college, right?
Yeah, and then he went through the journey where he went extremely right, defending former President Park during her impeachment case, and then he got reinstated into government office through this presidency, and then now he's the front runner for the campaign, which is kind of insane. Another notable candidate is the former party leader Han Dong-hoon, who openly spoke out against the president. Another famous one, the former presidential candidate Hong Joon-pyo.
I also think Anchersu's running, right?
Chursu's also running.
Yeah.
This is his 4th time running for president. And what's also interesting is Dang Hyun-won is running.
She's what's her background again?
So she's been elected into office 5 times.
Okay.
So she has that experience, but her most famous thing is so she's seen as a sort of centrist, right? Because she has a daughter with a mental illness.
Okay.
And she was on Korean TV.
Okay.
On the variety show Yenin program. And people just adore her for the fact that she's like, oh my god, she's taking care of her mentally ill child.
Wait, what does that have to do with centrist right though?
So she's seen as centrist right because she's seen as being more
humane,
yeah.
Huh?
No, that's just how the image politics works. But if you take a look at her policies, and so I live in Isu, which is actually just right next door to her constituency. The way she states some stuff is like, dude, it's questionable, her party politics. Also, she went on record of defending the now former president for his martial law tactics. She actually went to visit him in prison.
Wow.
So yeah, I don't know if she's gonna win. My vote is also Lee Jun-sung is running again.
Oh, right.
So running for the first time for presidency, Lee Jun-sung. And then for obviously the Democrat side, it's looking like Lee Jae-myung is gonna win.
Right. I think he's gonna win regardless.
Yeah.
He's gonna win the whole thing.
And regardless of this, Lee Jae-myung is looking like he's gonna be the next president. And all my Republican friends are looking to leave Korea.
Mine as well.
Yeah. And my genuinely open question is like, is it really that bad? Is it gonna be that bad?
I think so.
Yeah.
This is
what are you concerned about?
Me or what?
What are your friends are concerned about? Yeah, let's say friends.
I don't care who becomes president.
Right.
I was talking about this with my co-founders. It's a little bit of a separate discourse, but as long as someone gets elected who cares about startups and who can give me a lot of money as a new newly married couple about to have kids, that's all I care about. But
wait, you didn't tell me about the kids part.
Well, I'm gonna have kids sometime soon, right? Okay, and I'm newly married, so in terms of policies in Korea, we have a very low birth rate. So whichever president gives me a really good big incentive to have kids, I'm gonna be a huge fan of. That and giving me a lot of grants for startups. That's also a huge plus. Now, for my friends, what they care about is tax rates. This is the classic economics 101 problem. The problem with high tax rate is you're gonna drive out a lot of the rich folks. They're gonna go want to live in places with lower tax rates.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what's happening in Korea.
Yeah, it's called capital drain, right?
Yeah.
Just like brain drain.
Yeah.
So two things. So I read a lot of policy and I think based on policy as opposed to image politics, which is why I told my parents, you in your specific circumstance, because you guys have multiple real estate units, you guys should vote conservative this election. But if it was me and I don't have any real estate portfolio, I would vote for Mark Carney, the Liberal Party in Canada. But likewise, in Korea, I understand the taxation issue is very obviously it's a huge fucking issue. The main issue I'm assuming your friends are concerned about is inheritance tax.
Yes.
And Lee has made it very clear that he's not going to touch this issue.
But it's also tax. The biggest thing is inheritance tax, but secondary to that is all the other sort of high taxes.
Right, but then he also did state that one of the things that rich people in this country actually hate is the fact that you have to pay income taxes on dividend income, which is on a graduated scale as opposed to capital gains tax, which is on a flat scale. So this is a huge point of contention in any country. Americans tax it on the capital gains tax scale, so do Canadians, a lot of countries. But in Korea, it's taxed on income tax is just I think it was No, Japan's moving away from this, but Taiwan has a similar system.
Isn't there also like another sort of taxation on rich people if they have multiple properties though?
So that's real estate policy. That's
so they also have huge issues with that.
Right,
too.
but to be fair, this administration actually had a chance to sort of try and address that.
Yeah.
Obviously, they don't
They
have the
fucked
seats
up.
and policy.
Yeah.
They don't have the seats
in the house.
necessary in the House, but they did fuck up. They fucked up royally.
They fucked up in everything.
Yeah. But Lee has made clear that he wants to essentially embolden he wants to write down into law shareholder primacy.
Shareholder
Primacy.
What's primacy?
Essentially putting shareholder interests above.
Above.
Yeah, above like special interests or like other interests. So for example, the biggest issue in Korea is that chaebols, they put chaebol interests on top of everything else in terms of shareholders.
Got it. So fiduciary duty.
Yeah.
It's like making that crystal like a thing.
So technically fiduciary duty is to the company,
Yeah.
but then they're actually trying to put into law, the board of directors has to act in the best interest of the company and its shareholders.
Okay. Yep.
Because
yep.
usually the company is taken to mean the ruling family, which is kind of strange. But anyway, so he wants to enshrine that into law, which I agree with. He has said he was open for debate into moving dividend income into capital gains. He hasn't made it explicit, which I am worried about. But then, like, the general direction is telling me he's not going to be as bad. And I've seen, like, Justin Trudeau's Canada, it wasn't as bad as people were making it out to be. Obviously, it could be better. But...
Well, what do you mean by Justin Trudeau not being as bad as people?
The biggest issue people have with Justin Trudeau...
Like, before he became Prime Minister?
No, after he became Prime Minister.
Okay.
The biggest issue people have with Justin Trudeau is that the economy is bad.
Yeah.
Right? And per capita income has gone down. That is totally on him, but that was his
immigration too, though.
Yeah, so that's partially his failed immigration policy, but also partially is the fact that Canada has a massive dependency on its real estate sector.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, a lot of the policies that can actually swing this lies with the provinces, not the federal government.
So I don't know much about Canadian policies. I have heard about this much. But I also think it has to do with this being image politics, because I think what has Justin Trudeau really accomplished in life before he became Prime Minister, other than being the son of an ex-Prime Minister?
I think this is a fair point. I think, but
and like
it's not image politics.
He doesn't come off as someone who's powerful.
Right, but at the same time, is he qualified for the position? I think that's a fair question that everyone should ask. But at the same time, then let's bring it back to Korea. Out of all these people, who's the most qualified for the position, right?
I think the thing about Korea is actually the opposite issue. I think people are, in a way, too overqualified because they are all like, look at all these guys. They're all lawyers. They're all like career politicians. Where are like the entrepreneurs? Like,
right? Okay.
Really, I don't want to quote Donald Trump's campaign, but drain the swamp. Like, we need someone like that in Korea, I think.
Okay.
I think so. Korea actually has other issues.
No, so I would say, I would say Korea has the same issue because remember, one of the previous presidents of this country was a businessman.
Lee Myung-bak.
Yeah, and
you
like him. You like him. Yeah, let's be. You like him.
Yeah.
Like he has his bright moments and he has his dark moments.
Yeah.
Obviously. Like, I don't like the fact that the countless legal lawsuits regarding his personal finances.
Afterwards,
But based on purely his political action, I'd say he was overall he was an inconsequential president in terms of impact, which I think for someone doing business is good.
But also, I think every other president did horribly. So if you're inconsequential, that actually puts you in a
right.
Like, we gotta peer adjust that.
Right. But at the same time, if you take a look at, so I guess I want to address this about Justin Trudeau first.
Yeah.
If you want to say that about Justin Trudeau, then and this is actually how Canadians are reacting, by the way. Now you have Mark Carney and Pierre Poilievre. And then take a look at the resumes. Pierre Poilievre's resume is sparse.
Yeah.
Super sparse.
Yeah. Mark.
He took 10 years to graduate from college because he was focusing on politics.
Right.
Whereas Mark Carney, his
like
resume
BlackRock
is
CEO,
stacked.
Black something. No, he was also the Secretary of Commerce or something.
So
he's very qualified.
He started off at Goldman Sachs.
Yeah.
And then he moved up the ranks. He went to BlackRock.
BlackRock, right?
No.
Or is it
He went to Brookfield.
Okay, yeah.
Brookfield Asset Management.
Yeah.
And he was one of their partners. And then he moved into public office with his. He was a governor. He was the governor for the Bank of Canada during the financial crisis. He was the governor for the Bank of England during Brexit.
Mm-hmm.
And then
Bank of England.
Yeah.
He's also an English citizen.
No, he's actually the first and only non-English citizen
to work for the Bank of England.
To head the Bank of England.
Huh, okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah, because he was a technical British subject, so he technically qualifies.
Wow, I didn't know that was possible.
But also, I think he's an Irish citizen by descent,
Huh.
so it's like super complicated.
Okay.
And then he came back and he's actually an outside board member for Stripe. And he was the first outside board member for Stripe. So he has an illustrious career.
Yeah.
And Canadians are realizing, dude, Pierre Poilievre is probably not the answer.
Yeah.
We've had Justin Trudeau before. We do not want this situation again.
Yeah.
So now we have Mark Carney, and I think we're gonna probably vote him into office. But likewise,
you're comparing that with Justin Trudeau because you don't want another unqualified person, right?
No, I don't want to leave the Justin Trudeau topic hanging, right? So I just want to close that loop.
Yeah.
But then bringing it back to Korea, you take a look at all these politicians. A lot of these guys, some of these guys have very sparse resumes.
Yeah.
Like for example, Lee Jun-seok's resume is very sparse. Not because he's young,
he's 40.
Right, but at the same time, he started a lot of businesses that haven't gone anywhere.
His claim to fame was that he graduated from Harvard, right?
Yeah, and he was on TV a couple of times. And also, technically, he was 청년 위원장, so the youth, the president of the youth chapter for the Republican Party in Korea at the time of Park Geun-hye's presidency, and she appointed him there.
Yeah.
So, long story. But then, a lot of these other guys have positions, but they haven't been in positions of power where they were able to make decisions. So, for example, Na Hyung-won.
I have no idea who she is.
Yeah, she's a 5-time elected member of the National Congress, so that means she has 20 years of political experience under her belt. Sure, she used to be party leader, actually. But at the same time, she doesn't have many things that she's accomplished under her belt. Han Dong-won, at the same time, he's an illustrious prosecutor, sure. The now former president, he was also a prosecutor before he entered office.
Yeah. They were best buddies.
Yeah, and they don't have political decision-making experience under their belt, right? So I think, which is why a lot of Koreans are flocking to Lee Jae-myung, because dude, he used to be the mayor of Seongnam, and he used to be the governor of Gyeonggi-do before he entered Congress. So people start to realize, dude, this sort of experience sort of does matter.
How much do you think?
By the way, I'm not vouching for Lee Jae-myung. I don't really give a shit. I'm Canadian.
We don't give a shit about Kim Se-hyun or.
I give a shit about Kim. I give a shit about Kim Se-hyun. Dude, I found my name. I could use it again.
We don't care who gets. Well, we don't care about Na Hyung-won. We're just talking.
Yeah, I'm just
everyone.
talking. Yeah.
But how much do you think the pushback against Lee Jae-myung is about the Democratic Party versus him as an individual? I.e., my Republican friends just equate the Democrats with communism.
So I think it's definitely...
It's like a knee-jerk reaction.
Right. So it's definitely a mix. It's just dude, Republicans talking about... In America, Republicans talking about Democrats is like this woke virus, right?
Or also the Democrats calling
Republicans
the Nazis.
Yeah. It's the same. They have knee-jerk reactions, but how much of it is based off of a person, how much of it is based off of the party? I think in this case, in this certain instance, Lee Jae-myung has a lot of baggage that he has to address personally. So I'd say 70% himself, 30% the
The
party.
party? Interesting. What do you think the 70% is about?
So like one of my biggest gripes about this man as an individual, the reason why he's giving such shady vibes is
He does give shady vibes. Though.
because he was called as a witness to a trial, and he declined 3 times. It wasn't even his trial; it was someone else's trial, and he was supposed to be a witness, and he declined 3 times, and that's shady as fuck.
Someone can. I mean, this might be to some like a conspiracy theory, but people have accused 7 people around him of having been murdered.
Yeah,
And-
and he was responsible for
But 7 is a lot of people.
Yeah, 7
to
people
be-
mysteriously disappeared.
Yeah, that's a lot of people. If it was one person, then it's like whatever. This is a conspiracy theory.
Yeah.
But like 7 is like a very high number of people around you to die.
Right.
Seriously.
Right. So those sorts of baggages. Also, like his wife, I think the trial is still going on that he was abusing the credit card given to him by the province of Gyeonggi-do.
Right.
And like he still has a lot of he also I don't know why people underplay this on the Democrat side, and I have a huge issue with this. He sent money to the North Koreans.
Really? How much money?
This is all allocated.
Uh-huh.
I think it was to the tune of $1 million to have him visit North Korea for a photo op for his political campaign. And it was all organized by this guy who was actually convicted, a former mafia member turned businessman, right? So this guy was convicted. Lee Jae-myung's deputy during that time was convicted, but Lee Jae-myung is still like found. He's still on trial, and it's like leaning towards innocence right now, and people don't understand this, and you have to address this.
So you put the numbers at 70-30, like 70% of Republicans don't like Lee Jae-myung as a person, 30% of them don't like the Democratic Party. I would actually put that number differently. I would say it's like almost the opposite. 30% of people don't like Lee Jae-myung, 70% of my friends don't like the Democratic Party because I think they highly correlate the Democratic Party with China.
Oh, that's also
And
a fair
Chinese
point,
money.
yeah.
And how much of that do you think is true? Because I think I actually buy into that because like America, they're doing policy like what is that word? Hegemony. They're trying to play the American first policies.
Oh, they were the
globally.
hegemon, yeah.
Yeah, and like why wouldn't China be doing that too? Like I'm so sure that we have Chinese spies in Korea, like 10,000s of them.
So like we have American spies in Korea too.
That too. So I think it's gonna be like if I'm pretty sure Americans are pushing for Republicans and Chinese people are pushing for Democratic Party. To deny that is naive. And like my friends, they don't like Chinese.
To deny this, I don't think it would be naive. I would say, look, honestly, depending on the administration, your taste preference is going to differ.
Mm-hmm.
Like, not every American administration is going to want a Republican president in Korea.
In Korea, yeah.
So, like, heck, it might actually be favorable to have a Democratic president in Korea, so that Korea can warm up to China, and we can have a corridor of dialogue with China, which America does not have right now. Yeah, so the public safety alert just like cut off the video, so I'll just stitch it.
Yeah.
America doesn't have a direct line of dialogue between Beijing and the White House. So having a Democratic president in Korea could be favorable to
open up.
reinstate ties, right? But
But that really means that Korea becomes like a vassal state for China.
or for America, like honestly, I think Korea's fate is as a vassal state. It does not have enough of a pull in the region to stand alone as a country.
It's so sad.
It is sad, but dude, I'm from Canada. I've been living under a vassal state my entire life. I don't know.
51st state.
Don't get me started. Elbows up. But like the view that the Democratic Party is favorable to China is justified 100%.
Right.
But the view that the Republican Party is favorable for America is unjustified.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, because they're statistically speaking, The Republican Party has done nothing for the Americans. We have not
we're not actually opening up.
We're not.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I'm saying like we have not had more favorable terms for trade under a Republican administration in this country. We've not had any semblance of favorable treatment under a Republican president when it comes to American relations.
I think how the dialogue is being framed currently is China versus Japan plus America.
So I can see how the Republican Party here is favorable to
Japan. Yep.
Yeah, that's completely justified.
Yep.
But to think that extends to America, I think is unjustified.
Yeah.
But it's just like, dude, you vote in the conservatives in Canada, you're more favorable to America, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
But to say that you vote in the liberals and all of a sudden you're more favorable to China, when in reality the liberals tend to be more favorable towards Europe. But to think that relation extends somehow to China, I think you're spinning the wheels in your imagination a bit. But going back to understand your Republican friends, I understand, dude. Like, if you vote in the Democrats, historically they've shown like strong ties to China. But bear in mind, the peak of that Korea-China relations actually happened under Park Geun-hye, and she was a Republican.
Would you say that that's true?
She went to one of their military parades.
But what about under Moon Jae-in?
He didn't go.
But Moon Jae-in got a lot. Well, he's super friendly towards North Koreans.
No, that's fair. That's a fair point.
Which is like an extension of China.
Again, that's a bit of a stretch of the imagination. Let's just take a look at the
But would you say that's... So
I would say on average,
yeah.
the Democrats are more favorable to China. Absolutely. But in terms of individuals, Park Geun-hye was the most favorable president.
To China, yeah.
Yeah.
But, I mean, it's a little bit of like nuance, but Moon Jae-in was the closest to North Korea, though. That's a fact.
Right, but
other than Kim Dae-jung, who did the...
Right, but at that time, how favorable was North Korean Chinese relations? That's speculation, right?
Yeah.
To say that just because you're friends with... Dude, it's like this. You're friends with me, and your relation with me is stronger, and by virtue of that, all of a sudden you think that... people think that you're friends with Jason. But you guys didn't even know each other until I made the intro.
But the thing is, you can't ignore North Korea too. Like, it's like there's a lot of parties involved, and it's not just China that we're like are the only relationship that matters. And I think the North Korean
right. But to say that just because these guys are favorable, is extremely favorable somehow to North Korea, is ignoring the fact that North Korea actually is super favorable now to Russia as opposed to China.
Yeah.
Right? It's all geopolitics.
Their relationship also matters.
Yeah. So it's like
it's very complicated.
It's a very complicated game, and you're trying to simplify it down to a simple diagram of arrows. It's very difficult to do that.
Yeah. No, I agree.
Yeah. So while I agree, and the fear of Chinese money coming into Korea should absolutely scare the shit out of a lot of people, especially people who have assets within the country. Honestly, like, the fear of Chinese dominance is quite overblown, especially because, dude, I come from Canada. Dude, there's a bunch of Chinese people who have parked their capital. Nothing really happens, and if in fact what they do is they inflate asset prices, so it's beneficial for a lot of your friends.
For people who already have assets.
Yes. And unfortunately, those people tend to favor the Republican Party.
But you can't say Chinese people being neutral in Canada would mean Chinese people being neutral in Korea.
You know what happens? So, like, a lot.
Do you agree with that, though?
So I understand that every country has a different dynamic with China.
Yeah.
I agree. But the vast majority, you could say the same thing. Like, why is then a lot of Chinese capital is taking over Australia as well, and they're geographically closer, and a lot of Australian trade in rare earth minerals and just like raw materials happens with China as opposed to the United States. Why then are the Australians not as afraid of China than Canadians even? Then I would say, look, because a lot of the capital investments that happens from China isn't driven by Beijing, it's driven by private interests.
Mm-hmm. But a lot of private interest in China is tied to the CCP.
You know what's funny? So, like, on paper it is, but what they end up trying to do, and I think Beijing, if you're on top of this and you're listening to this, go after these mofos, because a lot of these guys are trying to siphon money away from China and they're trying to park it elsewhere.
So you're saying
They're
that
trying to
people are
sever-
self-interested?
Yeah, they're trying to sever ties with the CCP and have a safe haven for their family and their assets. It's not driven by the CCP trying to take over. Dude, if the
But the CCP are some scary fuckers.
Oh, no,
Like,
I
they
agree.
will-
I
they will
agree.
Fuck you up.
Dude, if
Which is the
The-
scary part about China.
the problem with the people in power trying to cozy up to the CCP is fucking huge. That's a huge red flag. But the fact that you are scared of the CCP, but you try to, yeah, sure, you could stave off Chinese influence, but I don't think we should be severing ties with Chinese capital entirely. We should be careful, but we shouldn't sever ties with it.
Yeah. But I would say caution should take precedent.
But I feel like you should exercise caution everywhere. Americans are also trying to launder money.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a shit ton of paper companies with backing by Vladimir Putin and the Kremlin.
That are tied with like American companies.
Yeah, dude, there's shady shit everywhere. And
There's shady shit everywhere. So it does come down to like what you. This is like super big picture discussion, but it comes down to what kind of philosophy you believe in.
Oh, yeah,
If you
absolutely.
believe in communism, like it does at the end of the day it boils down to communism versus capitalism. Like what system do you see yourself belonging to?
Wait, what do you mean in that regard?
As in, like, there's so many like different like dynamics between different countries, and as you said, there's shady shit everywhere. So it's super complicated. But at the end of the day, it comes down to one simple question: do you believe in communism or do you believe in capitalism?
Okay, so I wouldn't actually go that philosophical. I'd say
Because for the masses, no one's gonna care if you say like this country is tied to that country, that company is tied to this country, like.
no. So I'm arguing you should go even more simpler than that. When you're voting, don't think about capitalism versus communism. Just think what's in your best interest.
That's also a different way to.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, because why are you trying to think ideology? You
Right.
don't understand these ideologies. I don't understand. Did you read Karl Marx's?
No, I did not.
Yeah, I didn't read Karl Marx. I didn't read a word of Karl Marx's work. I
Yeah.
didn't read anything in the Red Book. I didn't read anything in Lenin's work or Stalin's autobiography. I don't give a shit.
Because that's also a fair point. What's actually just gonna matter to you?
Yeah, you just play the system out. If it works in your best interest, just vote for it. Right? But like you try to overcomplicate this shit, you start voting it against your best interest.
Mm-hmm. That's
Why?
valid.
Why would you do this?
That is valid.
Because I'm telling you right now, if you don't have anything to inherit from your parents,
But to play the devil's advocate, how much of these like campaign promises at the end of the day are actually delivered? Like I can say all sorts of shit as a politician. Like let's say I want to target like men, right? I'm gonna say some shit like I'm gonna reduce the military service. I'm gonna like get rid of like, you know, money that's given to like women and stuff like that, and win your vote. And I'm just like not gonna deliver on them. That has happened historically every time for every president.
in every country, yeah. No,
So-
this is a very good point that you raised.
So that's why maybe it's better to go philosophical, to read up on some like.
No, but like, look, I'm gonna say this because look, the Republican Party originally gave us Abraham Lincoln,
Okay.
right? And the Democrats were actually in favor of slavery.
Mm-hmm.
But then, what happened? JFK and Lyndon B. Johnson happened, and then they were in favor. Democrats voted in favor of civil rights. All of a sudden,
Right.
the Dixie Democrats shifted sides to the Republican Party. That's when civil rights became an entirely Democrat issue. Now, free trade suddenly happens, and Democrats were vouching for the working class, union jobs. You shouldn't be offshoring, tariffs everywhere. Republicans, funded by global business leaders, wanted free trade. Then what happened? Bill Clinton fucking happened. Bill Clinton wanted free trade, and all of a sudden free trade became a Democrat issue. Now protectionism is a Republican issue. My point is,
It
terms
changes.
changes.
Yeah.
Terms change all the fucking time.
Yeah.
And obviously, so which is why I don't actually believe in like the whole political philosophy thing, because it changes with every single person. What is capitalism? Originally, capitalism was essentially was the fact to put, in terms of land, labor, capital, to put capital on top of the priority list, right? And originally, communism was saying no, you should put labor on the top of the priority list, and feudalism was saying no, you should put land on top of the priority list. That was the entire battle. And now now because there's 100+ years of historical context behind it, we have all these nuances. There's a difference between socialism and communism as well. Canada's socialist and North Korea is ostensibly communist, but communist aficionados would argue, no, that's actually totalitarian, fascist, authoritarian. Nobody's actually tried real communism, which I say is false, because communism does not work like theoretically. The incentive structures just simply fall apart. Which is why I don't believe
in voting
in terms of terminology.
Yeah.
Do the math yourself. Like, if you're that daft, you should not be voting.
So vote based on policies, even if campaign promises will not be voted.
Because if they haven't said a word, they're not going to do it 100%. They're not going to do it. But at least they said something. There's a semblance of a chance.
1% chance at least.
Yeah.
I buy into that. That actually makes sense.
Which is why, like, people are like, dude, do you actually support? No, I don't support any of these guys. I'm just trying to understand, like, who's gonna act in my best interest. That's it. I don't give a shit, dude. Like, I hate saying this, but dude, somebody decides to forfeit Europe let's say somebody decides to forfeit Europe and essentially supercharge the emigration of African refugees to Europe. I'd be for that if it was in my best interest. If somebody said deportations of Asian Americans from America, and if that were in my best interest, I would vote for it. Democracy works best when everyone votes in their best interest.
I did say that whoever promises to give me more startup grants and more money for newly wedded couples gets my vote. So
right. And unfortunately, like, I agree. Whoever gives me more money for having a child in this country, I don't have a vote, but I'll tell my wife to vote in that direction. But at the same time, I've seen firsthand the realities of startup grants. And to be honest, it no longer works in my best interest as an investor. It breeds, it becomes a petri dish for weak companies.
Yeah.
So I want to stave that shit off.
But as a country though, what does Korea do well for startups? Because it does not have best-in-class VCs, that's for sure. Between us two,
the VCs here are terrible.
So, I mean, Korea has to be good at something, and I think having a very generous grant program is actually what Korea does pretty well.
So it did scientific R&D really well. What it doesn't do really well is commercialization.
Yeah. But at least they're doing the scientific R&D grants pretty well.
No, but like, okay, so this is also going back to politics, but the previous administration actually cut off scientific R&D.
Yeah.
So I'm like super confused. But again, like I would argue, I'll catch a lot of flack for this. And people are gonna point to me, and whoever's watching this are gonna point to me in the streets like, you don't know jack shit about Korea. Of course I know, I'm fucking Canadian. But like, this country should not be in agriculture.
You mean manufacturing?
No, agriculture. This country should not be farming.
What do you think we should be doing?
This country, 100% should be automating manufacturing. 100%, just like supercharge that shit. Every single person should be trying to turn this into a giant mega factory that can pump out whatever it needs.
Semiconductors?
Yeah. That's what it should be focusing on, because that's what the people are good at. That's what the policies are structured around. That's what it should be doing, and it should turn into a giant mechanized work factory for the rest of the world, manufacturing plant for the rest of the world. The reason we're losing out to China is because Chinese labor is so fucking cheap, right?
So cheap.
So if you automate here enough to the point where productivity, a single person's productivity outpaces the productivity of 100 Chinese people in the factory, then you win. That's what I'm saying, and that is why I say don't get into agriculture. Unfortunately, the people on the other side who are war hawks and care about national security, and I agree, this is a fair point. In terms of national security, especially because Korea is still at war, we need food security.
Mm-hmm.
I agree.
Mm-hmm.
I agree. But then it also, to play the devil's advocate, you have allies in the US and Canada. And we are the breadbasket of the world.
Mm-hmm. So, would you say that Japan is different from the vision that you just pitched?
Oh, Japan is 100% different.
Because they automated a lot of stuff. They're like,
no, Japan is
Japan. So?
Japan's automation stopped in the 1980s. So their tech is outdated. What Korea is really good at is maintenance. It's surprisingly good, and it's surprisingly good at adopting new technologies for some reason. So, for example, a big issue in Japan is that they still stamp paperwork.
Yeah.
In Korea, they got rid of that. Now everything is DocuSign. It's kind of crazy. But even that slight difference, for the longest time in Japan, they didn't have a system like T-Money. They recently got Passable, which works with Apple Pay now, but they didn't have that for the longest time. Another thing that they didn't have for the longest time, obviously,
Is Japan's economy still bigger than Korea's?
Yeah, but on a per capita basis, no.
Oh.
Per capita, Koreans look better than Japanese people, which is kind of crazy
That
if
is
you think
crazy.
about it. But there's
why did they have so many like robots and stuff? Like, this might be a dumb question, but
because people
they just give us. It gives me a. I know what you mean by like they're very conservative to change, but at the same time, a lot of the imagery I have of Tokyo, at least, is like robots everywhere.
But okay, name a place where you've seen a robot in Tokyo.
Oh well, in movies actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
No, because first of all, people start thinking about robotics when they have a declining population. Japan's had a declining population for far longer than Korea. But second, Japan has been obsessed and showcasing humanoid robots, whereas the real robotic revolution has been happening in factory automation. And if you take a look at Korean factories, and Japanese factories, it's still people. It's still people, and there are companies that are several hundred years old, still like blacksmithing using hands. Whereas in
They like that Chinese
Yeah.
stuff too.
Whereas in Korea, you go to a Hyundai factory. Hyundai and Toyota also have like huge automated processes, right? But even if you go to a 중소기업, like a smaller business here in Korea, it's so much more advanced than a similar business in Japan because it's a lot of handmade manufacturing. Well, this sort of manufacturing actually has a place in high-end watchmaking. So Japan is actually number 2 in the world for high-end watches.
But you're saying because Korea is already pretty good at automating manufacturing, we should lean in onto that. And
Oh yeah,
like,
100%.
This should be our like position in the world.
Yeah.
I can see that. I mean, we were always good at making cars.
Not just cars,
phones,
consumer electronics.
Yeah, we were.
And what else? Oh, dude.
Phones, Samsung.
Yeah, but also,
consumer electronics.
was it more and more so? Humanoid robots are going to be a Korea thing too, because Hyundai bought Boston Dynamics.
Did they really?
Yeah, Hyundai is 80% owner of Boston.
When did they buy Boston Dynamics?
Like a year or 2 years ago.
I didn't know that.
So that was a good investment on their part.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, automate the shit out of it. I don't honestly. Yeah, that's what Korea should be focused on.
Why hasn't that happened yet? You think?
This is gonna be super controversial. People are
controversial takes are the best takes.
So people actually
Get a donut.
Yeah, go ahead. By the way, for those of you who don't know, Tim Hortons proud Canadian brand. Maple Crullers, if you haven't tried it, try it. Not sponsored, by the way. What was I gonna say?
Controversial.
Oh yeah. Labor unions.
Yep. Korea has very strong labor unions.
So, like, people think Korea has weak labor unions compared to Europe and America, but if you take a look at a lot of their contracts, Europe maybe, but Europe is a completely different animal. But in America, the labor union contracts, I think we discussed this previously as well. It doesn't cover at-will employment. That's sanctified in the law. That means companies can downsize whenever they feel like, a lot of the times, right? As long as it's justified. In Korean labor contracts, firing is actually like they can protect it under the collective bargaining agreement, and it's fucking insane. Second, and this is like specific to Hyundai, by the way. Because Hyundai has manufacturing plants all over the world. If they want to bring in a foreign manufactured model into Korea, they actually have to get approval from the union. So let's say, and this is a true fact, so Hyundai makes this small, compact crossover pickup vehicle called the Santa Cruz, based off the Tucson. And they built it in Georgia. And Korean consumers have been begging that they bring it to Korea. Along with the Kia Telluride, which is a full-size Palisade contender that's built in Mexico. They're begging, it's like, oh, please bring it to Korea. These cars are so awesome, it's all like hotcakes. They can't bring it in because the labor unions vetoed it. Because it's taking away jobs, manufacturing jobs from Korea.
So, is there any like economics case for unions, or is that do they exist just on a humanitarian?
Holy shit! Okay, like another controversial take. So the original theory for unions is that, dude, as an individual, you have no power against.
Like a humanitarian case, right?
Yeah, against the company, right? A system that has more money, more power than you, more resources than you. So, as a result, you collectively bargain. That's the whole concept of collective bargaining, right? So that you have as much, if not more, of an impact against the entity that you're trying to negotiate with. And this is true. This happens with the NHL. Like, this happens with sports leagues all across the world, like the NHL Players Association, the NBA Players Association. They have collective bargaining agreements in terms of like work hours and whatnot. It works wonders, absolutely, when it works. But when it starts to get distorted, these guys start extending their power beyond what was originally intended. And what happened in America, which is quite interesting, is so they leveraged the Sherman Antitrust Act, which was supposed to go after monopolies. And then the Republican government, which was like Nixon, Ford, and Reagan, these guys started wielding Sherman Antitrust against unions. And they started union busting. But so they went actually a huge step too far in the other direction. But what that did was it recalibrated Americans' expectations of what unions are supposed to do. Instead of overreaching in their power, they have certain powers that they wield now. Whereas in Korea, because of their history with dictatorships, right, the people overwhelmingly sided with the unions. And now we've gone a step too far in this direction.
So, multiple questions. Number one, do you think has any president attempted to do union busting in Korea? Do you think there should be a president who does that? And number three, do you think one, I guess, period of dictatorship warrants such a like negative pushback in all sorts of ways that's not really related to politics? Like, what does dictatorship have to do with unions? And how is that like a justification for unions existing?
Let me answer the third question first, because for the longest time, the dictatorship in Korea under the former President Park was hand in hand with the chaebars. As a result, like...
Was it?
Yeah,
I didn't know
he
that.
allowed the chaebols to
Become chaebols?
grow. And then Jeonduan, yeah, took a lot of money from them as well.
Interesting.
So like, dude, honestly, the anti-corporate attitude in this country is actually stemmed from the anti-chaebol attitude, and I think we need to like separate these two in order for the country to survive.
Can I say one?
Yeah, yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I'm like all over the place.
No, it's
but
fine.
We're gonna go based on that. I think the issue with the current Republican Party is that we have two factions of supporters. Number one, we have the pro-capitalists, and number two, we have like the 태극기 부대들. And I think it's really hard as like a young guy who genuinely believes in the power of business to vote for the Republicans because it's matched in with these like crazy far right people.
No, I agree.
And you need to, and the way for the Korean Republican Party to survive going forward is to separate these like factions.
Right.
But your thing about the
Chaebol
chaebols
and corporate. Because chaebols are not corporations.
they're not, yeah.
Yeah.
They're
But
oligarchs.
I hate saying this to like a lot of my friends. Like, dude, the Democrats are anti-business. No, they're anti-chaebol in most
It is
cases.
different.
But then look, they have a lot of anti-corporate sentiment because a lot of the corporate
It's
sentiment and the
mashed.
chaebol sentiment is being intertwined in Korean in the Korean ethos.
Mm-hmm.
If we do not get rid of this, I keep saying we have to kill the chaebols for the country to survive. But anyway, going back, pro-union means anti-chaebol and anti-corporate by extension.
Mm-hmm.
But
because it has that history of
Right.
intertwining. Okay.
But now pro-corporation means anti-union because you're pro-corporation, you're pro-chaebol, and chaebols are anti-union.
Right.
That's how it works in
That's
this country.
so complicated. Yeah.
You come to Canada, dude. I sided with unions all the time, dude. Unions make sense. Like, yeah, no, they should definitely collectively bargain because, dude, like, if GM was coming after my ass, I'd be scared.
Right. Or Boeing.
Yeah,
Killing all their
Yeah.
whistleblowers.
but in Korea, it's the opposite, dude. If you as a startup founder saw your labor unionizing, you'd be scared shitless because
Right.
all of a sudden you think like, dude, am I becoming chaebol? Are they like trying to come for my head? Because that's how the dichotomy was made. So it's manufactured,
So
the sentiment.
I don't know much about Park.
Dude, I don't know much. I know
Yeah.
even less.
Would you say that he allowed the chaebols to thrive for him to get any personal benefits from that? Or do you think it was just like a pure economics thing where it's like you let the pie grow and sure some people are going to get
A
so
rising
outsized-
tide lifts all boats.
Yeah.
Is what Ronald Reagan said. Ronald Reagan came after Park. Just an FYI.
What do you mean came after Park? Like,
So Park had his dictatorship first, and then Ronald Reagan came later.
okay.
So let me just say this: nobody's 100% altruistic,
Mm.
but at the same time, I don't think nobody's 100% selfish.
Mm-hmm. So the truth is somewhere in between.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
In terms of from a dictator's perspective, the fewer number of nodes that you have to take care of, the easier it becomes to rule.
So no need to make enemies, right?
But concentrating power is also massively helpful as opposed to trying to rule over a democracy where everyone's voice has the same weight. I'll just leave it at that.
One more about dictatorship stuff. What's your take on Lee Kuan Yew? Because he's known as like a beneficial or benevolent dictator.
So
So do you think Park could have been that, or was that something fundamentally different?
Lee Kuan Yew has a bunch of dark sides too.
So
There's
do you think
capital punishment. For example, if you back during Lee Kuan Yew's era, you chew gum.
I lived in Singapore.
Yeah, you get whipped in the back.
So what do you think?
No, obviously there are trade-offs, but my point
Trade-offs.
is like in terms of economic impact, these two are outliers.
These two, as in.
Park and Lee Kuan Yew.
Uh-huh.
And I do not say this lightly. Their economic impact has been a net benevolent factor in both these countries' trajectories.
For sure.
That being said, should we be relying on the benevolence of dictators moving forward? Absolutely not.
There's a very famous like quote that says, "Don't rely on the benevolence of like dictators or whatever." But yeah,
Don't rely on the benevolence of others.
of others. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
which is why I said vote in your best interest.
Yeah. Yeah.
These people are not going to take care of you in your old age.
Yeah.
These people are not doing this so that you live a better life. No, they're doing this because, look, if the economy gets better, the net side effect is that you're going to live better.
Mhm.
That's fair. But that's a side effect that they're willing to live by. It's just like saying to us, like, I hate thinking of business leaders as heroes because they make jobs in the economy.
Mhm.
Because honestly, dude, if you had a choice to build a $1 billion business with just the 3 co-founders you have, would you hire a single soul?
No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because why? You want to make money, you don't want to make jobs. The
It's
side
a
effect
it's a side effect.
of you making money is you creating jobs.
Yeah.
Let's not conflate the two.
Yeah.
I wonder what my friends are going to think after I put this out.
Do your friends watch this or no?
Some.
Oh, some really? Wow.
But Jane knows this side of me. I know that for a fact. My wife knows this side of me. So do my parents.
This side of being what?
Like my political views of
Right, right. But I value your opinion because it's based on evidence and rationalism. It's not like, oh, like poor, like, you know, Joe, or poor, you know, Mary, she has to work long hours and like life is tough, and like, you know, all these rich people, they just want to like extort the common folk. Like those kind of emotional appeals aren't really.
Like, I have my qualms against billionaires, obviously.
Mhm.
But my qualms against billionaires is that they're trying to overreach their influence. Alright, look, if you want to make money, I think that profit motive is the single biggest factor, the single biggest motivator that we have for progress.
Yeah.
Taking that away is a net negative for society, in my
Mhm.
mind, because people are not going to work as hard.
Yeah.
That being said, do I think it's just that the poor have to work longer? Obviously not. But do I think just because of that we have to overhaul the system? Absolutely not.
Mm-hmm.
I think there are ways to tweak the system that we can help provide a net benefit for these people. But that being said, like it's about trying to motivate them to pick better options as opposed to, you know, subsidizing their bad decisions.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying, dude, yeah, no, we should give universal basic income to drug addicts. Dude, I have issues with that as well in my mind. But my point is, dude, if we have drug addicts, we should incentivize these people to seek rehab as opposed to go hiding underground and just shooting up their arms and killing themselves.
So, what do you think is the issue with, where do we stand in terms of chaebols in Korea?
So,
and what do you think we should do to move forward?
Every society has a class of aristocrats that you hold up to a higher degree of esteem and they're untouchable. So, for example, in the British Commonwealth, it's the British royal family, which is why I am a staunch advocate for Canada going republic. In America, it's the class of billionaires and corporate executives. That is essentially the same class as Korea's chaebols. If you take a look at the Korean chaebols, who people essentially suck up to on the internet comments, Lee Jae-young, SK's Choi Tae-won, all these guys who have inherited their wealth, they don't actually care about the newly minted billionaires like Chung Byung-yu from Crafton, or
fair point.
MBK, Nexons, Kim Tae-jin. They don't actually care about these people because Kim Bom-soo, because like, dude, they're just like, oh my god, you guys are trying to play chaebol, you guys aren't chaebol, because why? We already have an established old aristocrat. It's just like, we don't talk about Robin Hood's CEO in the same light as Elon Musk. It's the same thing. What was the original question regarding the?
Where do we stand in terms of chaebol in Korea, and like what should we do to? Because we mentioned like the whole pro-capitalism, pro-chaebol, and like all that being intertwined.
I think
and,
you're gonna like this argument. It actually comes full circle. So one of the things that we have to do is we have to weaken the grasp. We have to essentially sever the connection between chaebols and controlling interests, equity stakes.
Mhm.
So because if you take a look at it, on average they hold less than 50%, obviously, but on average they hold less than a quarter
Mhm.
of a controlling interest in their entire business portfolio,
Mhm.
and yet they play around as owners. That's fucked up.
Isn't that also because even if they own less than 15%, if they have a very complicated corporate structure where it's like
Yeah, the fact that we allow that.
right.
Why do we allow that? But even if it's circular, if they hold less than 15%,
It still should.
yeah, why do they have a controlling interest? Does it suddenly magically snowpile up? It doesn't. That's not how math works, right? So, one of the issues with this is I genuinely see this. A lot of people in Yoido and the financial sector are saying we have to reform the was it the trade law, 상법, in this country to reflect the fact that corporate executives have to act in the best interest of their shareholders as well. Lee Jae-myung is actually saying this.
Yeah, that's what you did say earlier.
And he said this explicitly.
So I have more questions. Can't this also be a Republican policy too? Can't the frontrunner also
Right. No, I agree.
Right.
I agree. But nobody said it.
That's stupid.
Yeah, that's fucking stupid. But you know why? Because
they're eating up the chaebol money.
No, that too. But like both sides are eating up chaebol money. You know, the thing is, like I said, pro corporation, pro chaebol have been conflated in this country.
Right.
And it's fucked up.
And their Republican voter base is pro-capitalism, so you can't go against
chaebols because you're seen as anti-corporation.
Right.
Which shouldn't be the case in a functioning society.
Right.
I'm not saying Lee Jae-myung is a good person. Not at all. By
far, but that's a good policy, you're saying.
Yeah, it's a fucking great policy. It should happen.
You have a very nuanced take, and I buy into it actually. You know what would be also great is if someone could, to make this sort of a bipartisan policy, also weaken the labor union.
I agree. So,
and put that together and then pass that as a bipartisan issue.
No, so I think if we first
give and take.
So here's the thing. So the financial regulator here in Korea has actually come out in support of the reform of trade law here in Korea, and so has the Bank of Korea. So everybody is on board except for the Republican Party. That's it. So this reform does have to happen first. But secondarily, to that point, labor reform has to happen. I think that's something that the Republican Party can definitely take as their primary issue in the next election cycle, which is what they fucking should do, by all means. But nobody's strategizing on this front because they're playing image politics, and I hate this about this country.
Elaborate, what do you mean? Why are they not doing the labor reform? Because of image politics.
Because they're too busy bashing each other. Nobody's focusing on the issues. So if you take a look at Canadian, I love this about Canada, and I will say this unashamedly. If you take a look at the Canadian debates, very little trash talk.
Really?
A lot of policy talk. And I love it. It's good and it's very informative. Take a look at the debates in presidential countries. A lot of bashing. Because you just have to get over that one person. Whereas in a parliamentary system, you have to garner. So you have to garner votes, right? Instead of winning against the other parties, you have to say, I'm the best option. Whereas in a two-party system like Korea and America, you just have to beat the other guy.
So the Republican Party is also just busy trying to beat the other guy.
Yeah, they're too busy trying to paint. So the end game apparently in Han Dong-un's mind for the longest time was that, dude, Lee Jae-myung he's gonna go to jail. We just have to wait it out. And then he apparently he's on the record saying, dude, and then martial law happened, and I felt the world
crumbling
in my hands.
Right.
And I agree with that sentiment because, dude, if Lee Jae-myung went to jail, that party is the party of a criminal.
Right.
And now, our party is the party of a criminal. And in a duopoly, if we're rubbish, they're the only choice.
Right.
I hate that.
Do you think? Well, here's another unrelated question. Why do you think the martial law was declared?
I do genuinely think that he saw it as a political move.
Really?
Because otherwise it doesn't make sense.
I think he's just dumb.
So
I think he's literally like.
No, but look, he understood the ramifications.
I don't think he did. I think he genuinely thought that he was gonna thrive in a martial law country. I don't think he ever
So the
expected
reason why I disagree with this is because, look, first of all, he wasn't the one who came up with the idea. It was his advisors.
Yeah.
But when he heard the news from his advisors, he didn't jump immediately at the chance. That tells me he had a bit more nuance in his brain. So I don't actually fully discount the fact that this is a functioning individual human being. Second, the part that I really liked about the former president is that when he was prosecuting the former president Park Geun-hye, he said, "I am loyal to the system, not to an individual." And when he said that told me, dude, this guy understands the game he's playing.
He did say that. I think I had a debate with my friends about this.
Yeah.
But I genuinely think that he might have been. You can. Have you heard of this thing called Hanlon's razor?
I've heard of Occam's razor.
Yes, but it's similar. It's like a philosophical razor, but don't attribute to malice.
Oh, what you can attribute to stupidity.
But
I'm not saying there's malice involved.
Right, but a lot of things are easier to attribute to stupidity than any other intention.
I think the end result is stupidity, by all means. He didn't obviously think this entire thing through. But that being said,
he didn't think it's the entire thing through.
Yeah, that's stupidity.
Yeah.
But in his thought process, was there no logic? No, I think there was
a little bit
of
logic, yeah. I'm not saying he's like a vegetable.
Yeah.
But I think it was very stupid at the end of it.
Oh, yeah.
Interesting. So who do you think will win? Lee Jae-myung?
100% Lee Jae-myung, but I don't think he's gonna be the saving grace for this country.
No.
But he's
very sad.
I think he's gonna do a lot of things that needs to happen.
Such as the trade law reform.
I think the trade law reform is gonna be his magnum opus.
Okay.
But secondly, they're also talking about a constitutional reform.
That needs to happen. Yeah.
That needs to happen because the peculiar part about Korean politics is that the terms are staggered. So the presidential term is 5 years. The Congress term is 4 years. So inevitably, you get a lame duck president for 4 years every once in a while, and it's kind of stupid. So they're trying to line everything up, and also, if you have a single-term president, as soon as they're voted into office, and
they're lame duck.
Yeah, they're lame duck. It's like, dude, why would you even have this system? So they're trying to make it so that it incentivizes people to at least behave for the first part of their goddamn career. Right. So those sorts of reforms, I think, is going to happen under his presidency, if he's elected into office. That being said, a lot of things that needs to happen won't happen, such as moving the capital to Sejong, which needs to happen direly.
Well, what's moving capital to Sejong?
So originally the plan was to move the entire capital, all the government functions, to Sejong시.
I did not know that was
because the population was concentrating its soul too hard.
So they wanted to make a Washington D.C. place.
So that it sort of, dissipates the...
Where's Sejong시?
It's in Chungcheongbuk, just north of Daejeon.
What?
Yeah.
Wait, this was a actual...
Sejong시 exists?
Well, how well thought out was this plan?
It was super well. It was actually...
Really?
Actually, the original plan came under Park Jong-hee.
Park Jong-hee?
Yeah.
Wow.
So it's been around for a while. They voted when Roh Moo-hyun was still in office. They were pursuing it. even after 노무현, 이명박 stopped it, but Park Geun-hye reinstated it. It's like a bipartisan issue.
Wow. What's the vote against?
So
Like,
during
why
this
people
is super
against-
interesting. I
yeah.
hate the politics of this too. But during Nomuyen's presidency, the Republican Party then actually took this to Constitutional Court,
Mhm.
and the Constitutional Court deemed it unconstitutional because in the Constitution it deems the capital to be Seoul.
Wow. Okay. So this is part of constitutional reform then.
But I don't think it's gonna happen because so many politicians have real estate in Seoul. It's a conflict of interest. I think it's fucking retarded. So that shit's not gonna happen. The whole thing about
But isn't the whole like the reason why the constitutional Supreme Court exists is because it's supposed to be like non-partisan and just very objective. As long as you punt it to the court, whether or not politicians have real estate in Seoul shouldn't matter, right? Theoretically.
no. So you have to reform the Constitution.
Mm-hmm. You're saying it won't even get to that place.
Yeah. Why would they reform
Right,
the
right,
Constitution
right.
if it's gonna impact their portfolio?
Right. Okay, yeah. It has to be the Congress who actually reforms that, and then maybe goes to court.
Yeah.
Fair.
So it's not gonna happen.
Right.
Again, labor union rights isn't gonna happen anytime soon under his
Yeah.
presidency.
Yeah.
I think he probably try to cozy up to China based on historical facts.
Yeah.
But that's, I don't know, that's up for debate, honestly, the benefits and the cons of that. But more importantly, what I do see being impacted from this, he has a propensity for populism.
Yeah, he's. That's putting it lightly. He's the populist candidate.
So like spray and pray.
Spray and pray what?
Spray and pray for economic progress. So he
spread like
gives money.
Gives money away to get votes.
I think so, but he has said that he's reconsidering it. I'm hoping he does, but I don't see it happening based on his pattern of behavior.
He's the guy that did UBI for Songnam, right?
Yeah.
Spray and pray indeed.
Right, but like also, is he gonna reform the chaebols? I don't think so.
You don't think so? You think that's like a false promise?
Yeah. Is he gonna reform the prosecutors? I don't even know if you need to reform the prosecutors. I actually don't get the argument on that.
What do you mean reform?
Like, there's a whole argument on the left wing side saying that the prosecutors are corrupt. I don't see the argument again for it. So I don't know why that's on his agenda. So like, it's a mishmash. But one thing does need to happen. You have to reform the constitution. You have to reform the trade law.
You know what's also interesting is I see a lot of, I can't phrase it that well currently, but a passing thought of mine has been there's a lot of parallels between the Korean Republic Party and the American Democratic Party.
Explain.
And vice versa. There's a lot of parallels between the Korean Democratic Party and the American Republican Party.
Okay, explain.
So one example would be like, it was always the right-wing folks in America trying to be like, oh, FBI is corrupt, CIA is corrupt, release those like JFK files, like the, what is it? What is that term that they use? The third state or the secrets, what is it?
Deep state.
The deep state. There's like a deep state that exists, and like all these like prosecutors and stuff, they're all corrupt. Get cash into the FBI so that he can clean up the system. That reminds me of what you said about the left-wing people wanting to.
A point about this.
Yeah.
There actually is a history. So Chonduan is actually part of a secret society within the army.
Yes. Yeah.
So like they have a history of this. But second, the Republican Party supported factions, the Taegukgi guys.
Yeah, in Korea.
Yeah. So they're actually saying more of those points down. Saying the election council was written to.
Right.
Yeah. So I think it's like conspiracy theorists exist on both sides. Like
both
the
sides,
Democrats have been saying. So the part that's been frustrating since 2024, that there has been an extremist faction within the Democratic Party that has been spewing the nonsense that Elon Musk somehow hacked into the system to to rig the election in Pennsylvania.
That's stupid.
But my point is, both sides are spewing conspiracy theories.
But I do feel like this might be a very overarching, like oversimplified statement, but the Republican Party in Korea seems out of touch.
Oh yeah.
And I think that can be applied to the Democratic Party in the States.
I get this argument.
Yeah.
And this is very pertinent.
And I don't know if you say like give me some examples, I can give you a few, but just taking a step back, that's all I'm trying to say.
I can give you an example.
What?
Chuck Schumer.
He is out of touch.
He did, so like the Democratic Party voter base wanted Chuck Schumer to boycott the spending bill.
Right.
And
he said he will, but he wouldn't.
Yeah, but he didn't.
Yeah.
Because he didn't want to suspend government functions.
Right.
Which is fucking horseshit because the Republican Party has done that all the time. The Democratic voter base wanted the same sort of showing of power. Chuck Schumer didn't do it. But likewise, the Republican Party in Korea, absolutely
all over
fucking incompetent.
Yeah.
They're
fighting each other.
Yeah, all over the place.
And I feel like that's how the Democrats are like in the States.
Right now.
Yeah. And that's what I mean. I feel
I think
like
that
there
makes
are
a lot
some
of
parallels.
sense.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. But anywho, that's my take. That's my political bias. I don't really support any candidate.
Me either. Just startup money and marriage money.
Also, like, get rid of capital controls. Why do I have to report every foreign transaction I make with the Bank of Korea?
Oh, I had to do that. It's a nightmare.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fucking retarded. Why would I have to do this? Honestly, get rid of capital controls. I can guarantee you people will make the right decision for themselves and they will become rich and generate tax revenue for you guys.
This HOC move is actually a very interesting thing. I haven't read up about that.
Yeah, but we can talk about population collapse in the next episode when Jason is here. Perfect. Because he's
He's
also in real estate.
Alright.
Just wait.